สวัสดีค่ะ Cooking is a skill that can only be made excellent through practice and time. Having worked in several countries over the past 50 years, Chef Alan Palmer gives us an insight of the cooking world. Alan, have you always enjoyed cooking since you were young?
Well, yeah, I started very young when I was 12 or 13. Helped my mum cook lunch and dinner, and then at 14 I started cooking like most Europeans do. We start very young, and so from 14, 15 I started to cook. I did a chef's apprenticeship, meaning I worked in a hotel in south of London. Went to school 1 day a week and did 3.5 years apprenticeship.
What made you decide that you want to get serious into cooking?
It's like every career. I think some people feel free and easy, and I felt I liked to do that. I liked to eat at the time, and it was just a fun thing to do at the time. At that time, I'm born in England, so cooking wasn't really famous then. You know, we had some very classical dishes which weren't too, let's say, glamorous. But so I did my apprenticeship, then I left for Switzerland. So in Switzerland there is a little bit different cuisine, of course, more continental, French, some Swiss specialties, so I learned more. So that's what every cook should do, shouldn't just stay in one country, should travel and work. So I had the chance to work in Switzerland for 9 years. In restaurants and hotels. Then in 1975, I was invited by the Swiss government with about 20 other colleagues to open a hotel and tourism school in Kenya, Nairobi. So this was set up specifically to train young Kenyans in the hospitality industry, kitchen and service, and there I stayed 5 years. So I had the chance to work in Africa. Then after that I went to Singapore.
But what did you find so fascinating about cooking?
Well, fascinating in a sense, well, that you get these ingredients and then you have the chance to develop recipes and dishes. But also, I guess, working with other colleagues from around the world, and you learn from them, and the chance to travel. And if you travel, then you pick up other ideas and you learn more things. So that was the fascination, to travel. Because at the end of the day, I've always been traveling. So I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in Africa. And now with these black boxes now, that's all I'm doing also, traveling around the world and continuing my wish to travel and see new things, and particularly now more on these competitions where we are involving younger chefs in all these different countries where we have these events. So.
How useful are cooking schools really? Because our grandmothers, they don't really go to any cooking schools, but they cook perfectly.
Okay, now there are different types of cooking schools. Okay, there's the grandmother's cooking school, if you want, where recipes are handed down from generation to generation. You have some culinary schools which are there more business-like, so they want to attract people who pay something to learn how to cook a cake or a dish or something, but they're the professional schools which industry needs. I mean, the whole thing is, when you want to become a chef, you should have a good basic training. So either go to a school, or in my case, I worked in a hotel. So I'm taught and I'm cooking every day. So the culinary schools should have good facilities, have good teachers, and preferably with some international affiliation. In Thailand, you have some good culinary schools who are affiliated to some international brands. In Singapore, there are many. In America, Europe, there are many culinary schools which have a specific program, who have great teachers, who basically model these young people into the profession. So from the basic training in the school, then they work in a hotel or restaurant, maybe 1 or 2 years, they move on, travel, because you only learn by traveling.
What are the most challenging tasks being a chef?
Well, the most challenging task, I guess, your lifestyle is a little bit different than if you're a banker or a doctor. No, maybe not doctor, but you're basically working when your friends are basically having a good time. I mean, you're working during the holiday seasons, the weekends, maybe a public holiday where they're having fun, but you have to work. So these are some of the challenges. But you also have the time to go off when they are working too. So, and of course, depending on the conditions of the kitchen. I mean, I'm going back nearly 50 years. I mean, no air conditioning in the kitchen and stuff like that. Heavy equipment. You know, that's why in the past, ladies found it difficult to work in kitchens. Heavy metal pots, but nowadays with the development of new equipment, new machinery, it's easier for the ladies now. That's why I find more and more in some countries want to become chefs because they can. And then, of course, the working conditions are better. Air conditioning, you know, the hours are structured, you know, you do your 8 hours a day. I mean, I was doing 12, 13 hours a day.
Wow.
I mean, that's what we had to do. It wasn't like union or things like that. But now it's become more attractive. And of course, the opportunity to travel is there too.
Alan, you have worked in so many different countries before. Do you cook differently for people in different countries?
Well, if we talk about the basic cooking skill, at the end of the day, the basics are everywhere. You know, although from the Western style of cooking to the Chinese, Thai, or whatever, there's a difference. But there's still basics in Thai cooking, in Chinese cooking, in Malaysian cooking. So the basics have to be there. I mean, for me to work in Africa in Kenya wasn't too different because from the colonial background, very English-oriented food there. I mean, you went to these big hotels in Nairobi and you had your Sunday brunch or your Sunday lunch or the same food as you would have in London or wherever. Of course, when I moved more to Singapore, I was there for so many years. I mean, Singapore has such a variety of cuisine. But I was teaching at the school there. So we were teaching the basic skills, Western cooking, and so I got more. But I got familiarized with typical Thai food also, Malaysian food, Singaporean food. So then you move on and then you see different foods. But what I'm doing now is I'm seeing global foods now. I'm going everywhere. I mean, 2 weeks ago I was in Philippines. Now I'm here, 2 weeks. I will be in Malaysia. So I'm just traveling around. But at the end of the day, a young chef must become familiar with the basic skill. You start there and then you can become more creative. What else has changed, I guess, over the years is we've gone through these phases of cuisine in a sense. 50 years ago, I mean, the English or the Swiss was very what we call comfort food, you know, good portions, cooked simply, good volume of portion size and stuff like that. We've gone to these phases of the nouvelle cuisine, where a trend was to have very small portion, very high quality, very high price. And then people say, hey, nothing on the plate, but must pay a lot of money. Then we've gone to this fusion, East meets West, fusion, confusion, some people, where it's become like on the plate you have so many flavors that you're confused. You don't know what flavor it is. Now that's sort of drifting aside now. We're going back to the more robust food of years gone by, where if it's a bit of meat, I want to have a good quality bit of meat, a nice sauce, or a great piece of fresh fish cooked perfectly with a sauce, and that's it. So we've gone a little bit back. I mean, I'm speaking generally. Okay? So yeah, you know, trends are changing. Equipment is changing. I mean, there's sophisticated equipment now where you can program. So if you want to roast a chicken, you can program it. And you have a thermometer, which you put in the chicken. And when the internal heat of the chicken is 70 or 80, then the chicken is cooked. You know, it's all computerized.
So technology helps a lot these days.
A lot. And you need it also because you need this equipment now because less and less people want to join this profession. Because it's still quite a hard profession. And we have difficulty in some countries. I'm not so sure about Thailand, but I know Singapore. I know places like even Sri Lanka or Europe. They don't want to do this job anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some feel that, you know, it depends again. Like in China, not China, Japan and Korea, you are professional. But some other countries, unfortunately, to be a cook, you're a little bit lower down the chain there. So some parents don't want their kids to be cooks, right? They want to be doctors, lawyers. But some countries, the approach is different. And then in some countries, cooks are paid low salary scale. Where in some other countries, a very good salary.
Especially if you're famous cooks.
Famous in a sense, famous maybe the person, but what you put on the plate. Where people will have to make reservation for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks in order to eat that food. I mean, I can't remember, but there's next door to here. There's a dim sum place there in the Central Mall there.
Right.
You have to. I tried to go the other night. You had to wait 1 hour, and there's a queue. But what are they cooking? Dim sum, no? That's it. Fresh dim sum. Must be good. The queue is there. How do you know that a restaurant is good? You check. You see if there's a queue. No queue, or the restaurant is empty. Then food is not so good. I mean, as a general guideline.
Right.
Yeah, so.
How come all the top chefs are men?